Hiya, welcome to Pickler The Podcast. My name is Stacie Townsend. I'll be your host along with John, the People's Champ, Davison. John, I'm really excited about tonight's episode. What do you think the number one question or theme of questions we get over here at Pickler is?
What is John Davison eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
I was actually going to say, is John Davison any good at pickleball? But it's actually nothing about you, John. Sorry to break it to you.
Damn.
It's actually about the rules. So I am super excited. I'm not going to waste any time. Bring him right in. We have the managing director of officiating from USA Pickleball. And I have to tell you his backstory because it's quite impressive. He's a former nuclear submarine officer, which I imagine that is maybe a lot of math, a lot of engineering, and a lot of things way beyond my lawyer brain. But Mark, after Peifer, after his career there, found pickleball, got super involved with USA Pickleball, became a referee. And then he joined the rules committee and climbed up the USA Pickleball ladder, so to speak, and really giving back to our sport. So welcome, Mark.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Stacie. You too, John.
So tell us, how did you even get into pickleball after this nuclear submarine?
I don't know that my story is too much different than anybody else. Somebody introduced it to me as a former tennis partner of mine. I lost track of him. 15 years later, I found him, and he said he was in pickleball. And he said, he had given up tennis probably 4 years earlier, and said, you got to get into pickleball. So I kind of filed that away, and then 5 years later, when I actually did retire, I turned to my wife because I was sitting in Oceanside, California, where I'm talking to you from, and I said, I gotta have something to do in retirement. And so we looked. She looked into something called Meetup. I guess some kind of process where you can meet up with people that are in have a similar interest. And she found a pickleball meetup on a Wednesday morning at 7:30 for free lessons. So we showed up, not knowing anything about the game, and other than what my buddy had told me over the phone 4 or 5 years earlier. And within 10 minutes, I knew that was it. And I was hooked in 10 minutes. So that's a very similar story a lot of people have.
Would you have thought you would have a second career, essentially?
No, I had no idea that I was going to end up where I'm at right now. At that point, I just wanted to have exercise, get to meet people, because I had moved into the Oceanside community from Columbus, Ohio. So I didn't know anybody here other than my wife and a couple of neighbors. But so that was a very big social outlet, and I was shocked at how social the sport was. It still is.
Yeah. So tell us what you do at USA Pickleball, because officiating, I know, covers a lot of things, but maybe some people don't. So tell us what your role is and what you help accomplish.
Well, I consider myself dual-hatted, so we'll just talk about the two different roles I play separately. The first one is the managing director of officiating. So that means the whole referee program. So whether the public sees referees at various tournaments that are live streamed, right? They see it at APP, they see it at PPA, they see it at MLP. To a lesser degree, the National Pickleball, U.S. Open. Those referees, every single referee you see, no matter where they're at, have all come through the USA Pickleball referee training and development program. And there's a very structured process to get to where they eventually end up on live stream. Not everybody just shows up in live stream. You have to kind of prove your mettle, if you will, the ability to be able to handle those kinds of matches. So that process is one that I'm responsible for, the training development. In fact, I left another phone call just to come on this one. We have 9 evaluators in the country that are the ones that actually confer the title of certified referee on people who have made it to the kind of the pinnacle of the referee tree. So they're talking about how do they maintain consistency among the evaluators. So it's a constant review and constant ability to look for ways to improve the process that I kind of push along. So that's been very fun, and there's a host of people that are involved in this thing. It's not just Mark Peifer. There's probably easily 80 people that are involved in various stages of the development program for referees. In fact, it's one of the strengths of the program is the sense of community that we have to help other people come along as referees. So that's the first responsibility I have. And with that comes a head referee responsibilities at certain tournaments. You'll see me at national championships. I'm the head referee at national championships in Indian Wells. And this next week I'll be in Atlantic City with that big indoor tournament that Jim Ludwig of U.S. Open fame is responsible for. So I'll be the head referee there. Pictona in December. So various head referee responsibilities come with that territory. But the other responsibility I have, the other hat that I wear, is chairman of the Rules Committee, USA Pickleball Rules Committee, which is really kind of, I think, the focus of this discussion here. What's going on with the rules? What can we expect in terms of rules for next year, that kind of thing. So that one is, I spend a lot of time on that, a lot of time answering questions that come in through email. I finally got to the point where there were so many people involved in that asking questions that I had to bring in 8 other people to help me answer these questions, because the questions are coming from around the world, pickleball. Mm-hmm. So as this sport grows, so do the number of questions about how you play the game.
Yeah. How many refs do you have under your wing around the world?
We have right now 811 distinct, differently. Wow. Now that's all levels. That's at level 1, level 2, and certified. And the certified ranks, the highest rank we have just over 200. And as you can imagine, they're concentrated in different pockets. Where do all the players? And players are in Florida, players are in Arizona, California. That's where we have the highest concentration of referees as well. And that's one of the challenges in the program is, if you have a tournament in Maine, well, they don't have a whole lot of certified refs there. So how do you get them there? So that's the kind of thing that is a challenge for various tournaments.
John, have you ever refereed a match?
I have.
I refereed a couple, and I have to give credit. It is, I know the rules, and as a player, for some reason, it's second nature, kind of the score. As a referee, that is hard. You have to, I think it's one extra person to manage in your head, because, when you're playing, you're one of the 4. So referee, that is a tough job.
Yeah. I did it once at a Lucy Kitcher tournament back in the day. And it was like my second or third tournament ever, I think. Probably like the third tournament, and Adam Belshie was like, "Hey, do you want to do this one with me, or do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Sure." And it was hard to like keep up with, and I think it was like a 3-5 gold medal, right? So it was manageable in terms of the pace of the play. It wasn't pro, but it was definitely hard to pay attention to everything that was going on and keep track of the score. I think I might have forgot a couple times. I think I actually I made 2 mistakes too. I let someone serve from the wrong spot for like 2 serves in a row.
You wouldn't have passed the evaluator's test, it sounds like.
I would not have. Yeah, I would have failed.
John, that's an interesting story, because that's the first mistake I made as a drafty referee. Hey, we need help. Anybody available? That's how I got into refereeing. I made a mistake, just like you did. I mean, somebody served 2 times in a row, and I didn't know what the rule was, and I was embarrassed. And so I said, "Well, that's the last time that happens." So.
Well, has it happened again?
No, of course not.
Since then,
I wouldn't do it on this anyway.
All right. Well, I'll have to find some video of you. See if you made any errors.
There's no doubt you'll find a couple of errors. That's one of the strengths of the program, and one of the things I emphasize that if we're making mistakes and we're learning from them, we're getting better. And so the referees know that I am very tolerant of mistakes, because as long as they learn from it and don't repeat them over and over again. So it's one of the things that helps us get better.
Do you have any idea how many games you've officiated, Mark?
There are referees who keep very close track of that. It's never been something that I felt was personally important. So no, I have no idea how many. I mean, I can tell you the mistakes I've made, to John's point. I know exactly when I made them. I know who I made them with. And I share those with the referees at the right times in training sessions. So.
Hey,
so
we're human, right?
Exactly.
We're all going to make mistakes at the end of the day.
What's your best pitch for someone to become a referee? Because 811 is great, but I know we need more, especially as the game really grows and in those different areas. So what's your best benchmark?
I think it's really simple. I think if you want the best seat in the house, come be a referee. If you want to learn the rules, and I actually tell everybody, look, in fact, when I used to teach actively, I would say, come learn the secrets about playing the game that only referees know. You come to a class, I'm going to tell you 9, if not 10 things about the rules where you can either gain an advantage using the rule book or prevent yourself from losing a point to somebody who thinks they knew the rules better than you do. And it's so whether you become a referee or not, come to this session just to learn what we know about the rules. But the other thing that I think really drives home is that I think people will become a referee if they see themselves in others. If I see somebody who, for example, is an engineer, another engineer, well, if they're a referee, I can be a referee. If I'm a school teacher, oh, well, Trish Winrow's a school teacher. If she can be I can be a referee. So I think if we make those kind of personal connections and people see themselves in others, they'll become, or at least become interested in at least seeing what this is all about. And then once we get them in the classroom and they see the sense of community that we have and how we all helping each other, that's really a powerful connection. That common experience of going through the same training program is a very, very powerful bond.
So are you referees in the background always talking about the rules? Is that what the conversation is?
I'll tell you, it is part of probably one of the most enjoyable things about going to a tournament as a referee are those conversations we have. Well, how would you have handled this? This is what just happened to me on court 14. How would you have handled this comment from this player? So I'm sure the pros and the players all talk about us. I mean, because we talk about them and what they're doing. Yeah. I mean, we talk about tendencies, especially with the pro players. And amateurs, it's a little more difficult, but the pro players, because they're so visible, I love the conversations about, well, who's got the best Ernie in the game? And how do you know it's coming? So that's kind of an advanced level of refereeing when we start talking about the tendency of different players and share those tendencies so we can be on top of it before it. That's the key. You got to anticipate some of these moves that they make.
Yeah. So if someone's a frequent Ernie or Bert or whatever, poaching a lot, you can kind of know that going in. Okay, I really have to pay attention to that person's feet.
Yeah.
Right. Something like that.
Yeah, and I share this with the level 2 referees who want to become certified. One of my favorite questions I ask them is similar to this. They come off the court after I've watched them in an observation. I'll say, okay, which of the 4 players had the closest or was most likely to create or conduct or have an illegal serve? Which one of the 4 players was most likely to have a foot fault? So I'm trying to look for their power of observation and their anticipatory skills, which is kind of a different question for referees. It's kind of a higher order. It's refereeing 301, not 101.
Is calling a kitchen footfall the best moment as a referee?
No, I think the best moment as a referee is knowing you did a good job afterwards. That you didn't make any mistakes in calling the score, getting the score backwards. I think that's probably the best moment. It's never. I don't think it's ever a best moment that you find fault that someone else has done. It's if you miss it, that's not very good, especially if it's on YouTube, and everybody's talking about it. So
all the YouTube comments are going off on you.
Yeah, that's probably not the best day to have. But finding the faults is not the issue. I think it's really having the satisfaction that you did a really good job and you know it.
Well, it sounds like the referee's job's only going to get harder, right? With all the YouTube, more eyes on the sport, more people watching. Maybe until we get the Hawkeye and pickleball, then it might be a little easier.
Well, we're making that transition. We're getting there gradually. You see the advent now of instant replay and the PPA and APP. You're going to see it at Nationals. First time at Nationals, we're going to have instant replay there. that's kind of the forerunner of a Hawkeye type system. And eventually get there as more money comes into the game. That's really the only barrier we have right now. I mean, the technology is available. The money is just not there to pay for it. But when we get there, then you'll certainly see it.
Yeah, like the MLP has the 360 cam, and then APP. I know Boxcar, they have those. I don't know if were you in Atlanta this past weekend? So yeah, I was like watching the stream, and they have those really nice sideline and baseline cams now, and they're still high. They're really high def, like zoomed in on the line, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So we're getting there. It's just taking time.
It is taking time. And I give the guys at Boxcar credit. USA Pickleball, we have a kind of a partnership with them for some of the events, the NCS events, and they responded in a big way. And Kyle Solenko and his crew at Boxcar got these cameras, which I think are state of the art. To your point, John, very high resolution. The frame rate is still kind of choppy when you get to a certain zoom point
and slow-mo.
But I think eventually we'll fix that as well.
Oh yeah, the equipment that Kyle has invested in is absolutely bonkers. I don't know if Mark, I'm sure you've seen the production truck that he has, the trailer. Stacie, I don't know if you've seen it, but it is legit. I mean, he's easily got $100,000 of equipment in there.
Wow.
With the cameras. It's pretty impressive. So it's definitely getting better and better. I feel like every tournament there's something new they're trying. So we'll get there.
So you think this will be the solution to maybe some of the line call drama we've seen lately at the pro level?
It certainly, I think, is the solution to the dilemma over whether we have line judges in the game. You don't see those anymore, and the reason you don't is because we didn't have a very good experience base of line judges. Those of us who have been in the game now for 4 or 5 years know that line judges came out of the stands, and you never know how many beers they already had, and there they are. And we saw that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Cheers.
And thinking back on it now, it's like, oh my gosh, how did we get ourselves in? Having line judges that were just volunteers, but back then that's all we knew, right? But I think it's really the solution to the line judge dilemma. Can we still have line judges? Yes, we can. We still train our certified referees to deal with line judges, and every referee is, by definition, a potential line judge if we get ourselves into a tournament setting where the pros are asking, or even amateurs for that matter, are asking for line judges because they're concerned about the line calls on the other side. What we see with the instant replay are only certain matches. It's typically, Championship Saturday or Championship Sunday. We don't have the capability of doing all courts that are live streamed. So line judges we may still see line judges in a limited capacity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the line judges are my favorite system, and I'm curious on your take on this, is the 2 referee system, the one on each side of the kitchen. I feel like that's the best, because the one referee is kind of focused on his side of the court, maybe the kitchen. Maybe you can elaborate on this because I'm curious on what each one's really looking for, but I just assume that one is keeping score, obviously, returner, server, whatever. And then like one half of the court, and then the other ref is really focused on the kitchen and the other half of the court. Is that your favorite system too?
I love the 2 ref system, but most people might find it of interest that the responsibilities of those 2 referees are very, very similar. The only time we actually say, okay, you look at X and you look at Y is on the serve. The person who has the clipboard, who we call the lead referee, on the serve is looking at the service motion. The supporting referee across the net to the other net post is looking at the feet placement. So that's the only time we have different responsibilities on what you look for. After that, after the serve, then both those referees across the net from each other are looking at exactly the same stuff. They're looking at foot faults, they're looking at earnings. And that's really the advent of this two-referee system, I give credit. The idea was hatched at TOC in 2019. Don Stanley had the mixed doubles final. I had the men's gold medal match at TOC, and we were there as single referees, and we missed a couple of Ernies. And after that, Don came up with the idea of the two-referee system, which is now universally adopted at tournaments at the highest levels with the pros because of the pace of the game, the speed of the game, especially that it's really the Ernie that drove the two-referee system. So if you're the referee and you have, Tyson Loon coming right at you, guess what? You're not going to see that launch point, and you're probably not going to see the landing point. But the referee across the net, you got a great view of it. So that's really kind of the reason behind the two-referee system.
Yeah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the hardest ball, when you have a one ref, right, the hardest foot fault to call is the push-off, because you're looking at the other side's foot, right, while this person's already going. So it's like I always see it's usually the push-off that's always the one that's missed because the eyes are still focused on this person's volley when this guy's already going, right? So is that what you see?
No, actually,
well?
for several of us, not to be boastful or not, but if you know what to look for, and back to our conversation on tendencies, push-off is one of the easiest ones to find because it's only going to happen on a lob. So if you're watching the feet, and you can tell when somebody lobs a ball in the air or hits it too high, then it's a quick transition. If your eyes are trained, you can see both non-volley zone lines through your peripheral vision. And we spent a lot of time teaching the strength and the power of your peripheral vision to referees because they think they got to do this. They don't. They can stay right here, and they can actually see more than what they actually can think they can see. So you see, you don't even watch the ball go up. You just sense the ball's going up in the air, and then boom, you know what to look for. You look, boom, right over here, and that push-off foot fault is actually very easy to call. The hardest part is whether they get 2 feet down. And so what we do is we train them to count 1, 2, watch the feet. You don't watch the ball being hit, but you listen for the ball off the paddle. So if you hear, that ball coming off the paddle before you get to number 2, guess what? You got a push-off foot fault. If 1, 2 land and then you hear the ball hit the paddle, everything's fine. So it's a matter of training and experience and tendencies and what to look for and how to look for it. I'm giving you all our trade secrets here.
Hey, I've been called on that one myself. I feel like that's the only time I've actually been called in the kitchen is that push off the lob. What I meant to say was, I think I said it wrong, was the push off of the Ernie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like that's the one I think is the hardest one. And then people, in YouTube comments, right, or whatever, be like, how did the ref miss that? I'm like, well, because they were still looking,
that's
on the other side.
Exactly right. That's why the second ref is so important at the highest levels of the game.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I don't like that the push-off overhead one because I've been called on that.
Well, it's when I'm the head referee, we always talk about what's changed from day to day. And if you go from singles where you can actually move your head back and forth and you're expected, because you have a better chance of being appealed on a line call and actually seeing it rather than saying, hey, I didn't really see it because I was watching feet in the non-volley zone. So you have singles day, and then you go to mixed doubles day. And if you have mixed doubles day, we talk about, all right, what are we going to see here? We're going to see push-off foot faults. All right, who's the most likely to create the push-off or actually conduct it? Well, it's going to be usually the guy, right? Because there isn't a guy that over 6'2" doesn't think he can't get to everything, right? So we actually talk about tall athletic men and women are the ones that are most likely to create the push-off foot faults. So it's again at the highest levels of refereeing, it's all about knowing and predicting where the next fault is going to occur and be there to watch for it when it happens.
John, I think you just tipped off all the referees. They know what to anticipate when they see the people's champ.
John, you're in trouble now.
Yeah.
I know. I'm making my comeback, APP Alabama. So I better not get one foot fault call while I'm there.
We're going to have to follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to bribe Mark here to tell his people.
Yep.
To just let me go.
Well, I want to change topics now to the rules, but before I do, big shout out to the referees. Thank you for all of your passion and commitment to the game and making it better. And Mark, thanks for leading the charge there. So I want to turn to your second hat now with the rules committee. And I would love for you to kind of explain the process, because you've done a lot of changes to make it more transparent, which I think is wonderful. And I'd love for you to explain that to our fans. Yeah,
so prior to 2 years ago, I don't think it was well known how you get a rule into the rule book, who's involved, who approves. And so we kind of uncloaked all that 2 years ago to explain the processes. There's actually a written process. You can go on the USA Pickleball website and you can read the process that we're using this year. But I want to do two things. One, explain the process, but also make it transparent. So you can actually watch the rules come through the various stages of development and review and approval. And it's a lot of work, as you can imagine, because before then it was all done kind of behind closed doors, and nobody knew what was really going on and when it was going to happen. With that comes a certain amount of accountability. Right now, we're about, I was supposed to have the Rules Committee voting results posted by the process the end of August. We're 14 days late on that because we had a couple of Rules Committee meetings we had to cancel for various reasons. So we're a little bit behind the schedule. And so, they got the schedule out there. It's very transparent. And I had my first email this morning from somebody, hey, you said you were going to have it out there on the 31st of August. What's going on? So that's the downside of being transparent, is that people hold you accountable. So, but that's part of the expectations here. So,
and I think a good point is the pickleball playing public is actively involved in it, right? Like I, as a USA Pickleball member or pickleball player, can submit a recommendation or even comment on other people's recommendations at certain points of the years, like whenever the process opens.
Yeah, process opens up typically in April for the following year, the rule book. And anybody who's a USA Pickleball member can actually submit a rule proposal. It goes in unfettered, untouched. Some of them are a little, some might be in conflict with 2 or 3 other rules that would really change the game. So sometimes we'll ask that person, do you really know what you're asking us to do here? And that's Bob Swisshelm's responsibility. A lot of people know Bob from refereeing. He's a great ref, and he's got some IT work background in his experience. And so I asked him to help us develop the open architecture for the open form of that. So there is a process where any USA Pickleball member can submit the proposal. It goes into the database as is. And then anybody, you don't even have to be a USA Pickleball member, anybody then can comment on the rules that have been put into the database. So they stay in there until, in this case, the middle of July. And then we closed not only the submission window, but also the comment window. And then the Rules Committee starts doing their work. And by that, I mean, we went through every one of the 77 rules that were submitted. We met every Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern for like 10 weeks in a row until we made our way all the way through all 77. In fact, we're having this conversation on Wednesday. Tomorrow night is our last meeting. We have one more meeting to talk about one last rule, and then we'll be done for 2023.
And then what's the next step?
The next step in the process is once we vote on each one of them, then we take the rules as is, or how we might have modified them. Sometimes we will reword the rule proposal to make it a little more understandable. but we'll vote on it, and then we send it to the USA Pickleball Board of Directors. And they are more than likely are going to get this Friday of this week. They will get what we just voted on Friday of this week, and then they have about a month to review it, and then I'll have a meeting with them to answer any questions, and then by the 1st of December, we should have it in good enough shape that we can release it publicly, and that starts the 30-day clock so that all players around the world can see what's coming in January 1st of 2023 and get used to the rules, play if there's anything that affects play on the court, get used to it.
Now you have players on that committee, right? Like Rob Cassidy's one.
Yes, Rob is kind of the pro player representative on the rules committee. We have 5 members of the rules committee. Mm-hmm. They're all a matter of record. Jeff Shank is a certified referee. Ken Schoonover, certified referee. Karen Parrish, myself, and then of course Rob Cassidy. Those are the 5 members of the rules committee.
I love whenever I see Rob Cassidy playing and there's a rules debate. I just get fired up because he knows it all too, right? So it's funny.
I'll tell you what, he's been a real delight to work with on the rules committee. He's got a really different perspective, and I was afraid that he would come in with only the pro player viewpoint on rules, and he has completely surprised me, and I think the other members of the rules committee. He spends more time thinking about how this rule would affect the amateur player than he does the pro player. So he has a very broad sense of responsibility for his participation in the rules committee. It's been he's made us rethink a couple of things, which I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect person for the job because he is so connected with the amateur community as well as he is such a respected pro at the same time. So, and of course he travels everywhere every weekend. So he meets everyone. He gets all those different perspectives. Right. So, he's definitely a good guy on the team, I feel like.
I think that tees up a good question. What do you think of, or what's the framework when a rule is submitted, Mark? Or how do you evaluate it? Are you thinking, is it good for the amateur, the pro? How does, like, what's the overall framework? And
what a great question. For the first time, we actually put that in place 2 years ago. And last year, in this current 2022 rule book, we actually published it in the rule book. You go to the back of the rule book, you'll see the 3 priorities that we have as a rules committee. And the first priority is, does this rule or rule change maintain the integrity of the game? Second thing, is it good for the players? Is there an advantage to how you learn the game, teach the game, and play the game? And then the third and last priority, is it enforceable? Is it a rule that's enforceable by referees? If you have a referee, or if you don't have a referee, is it easy enough for the players themselves to enforce the rule without an official on the court? So those 3 priorities: integrity of the game, what's good for the players, what's good for the enforcement of the rule, are the framework that we operate under. So any rule proposal has to hit at least one of those 3 elements.
What is the craziest rule proposal you've ever seen?
I would love to answer that, John. But if I did answer that, here's the thing I have to keep in mind. Everybody who submits a rule proposal, to them, that's the most important rule in the world. And so they're personally committed to it. So if I were to publicly say, hey, this particular rule that was submitted was crazy, I would immediately be an enemy of that person and all their friends. So I won't answer.
All right. Well,
respectfully, I won't answer.
The next time I see you at a tournament, I'm asking that question.
So all right. Okay. That's fair.
I won't be on the air this time.
Let's ask this one, John. What are the hot topic rules this year? And I'm sure I could guess at least one of them.
Oh,
so yeah. What are some that have been proposed?
Yeah, there's a couple of, obviously, come right to the forefront. One is the spin serve. What are we going to do with that? I think we've had now a good year of watching that and seeing what has happened with it. couple of things that I thought would happen have not happened, and other things I wasn't expecting have happened. So that was an interesting debate we had at the Rules Committee. We've already obviously voted on it. It'll go to the board here, as I said, maybe as early as Friday. The other one is rally scoring. It's got a lot of interest. We see it at MLP. We see the excitement behind that, so that's got a, there's kind of three different versions of rally, at least three different versions of rally scoring. Would we put something in the rule book that would allow the tournament director to have the option of using rally scoring? So that we had a big debate about that. I'm not prepared to tell you, where it's going, because I don't know what the board's going to do with it. I can tell you we had a split vote on it in the Rules Committee. So those are probably.
Did you have a split vote on the spin serve too, or just the rally?
Just the rally scoring. The spin serve, I think, turns out to be a relatively easy vote for this Rules Committee.
I'm excited to learn what that will be once it comes out. I know you can't drop it on us right now, but
I thought Mark was going to say that was what they were meeting about tomorrow. I thought that was going to be the outstanding one.
That had to be the first one on the docket if I had to imagine.
And I bet I could guess who the email was that Mark got. It might have been Zane Navratil. So asking, where's the answer to this spin serve?
I've had several discussions with Zane about the spin serve, but he's actually, and John Sincola and others that use it actively. But I've also talked to a lot of folks who don't use it, and to get their thoughts on it as well. As have the other Rules Committee members. We've all done our own due diligence on this independently. We come together and discuss it and vote. So,
any other rules? So spin serve.
I don't mind telling you, because maybe as early as Friday it'll be published. So it's not too big of a secret. But I'm not optimistic that the spin serve will survive. How's that for an answer?
Mm-hmm.
I'll make sure we drop this on Saturday, Mark.
Okay.
That's gonna be funny once it it doesn't pass or whatever. And it's the opposite direction.
John, where do you stand on the spin serve?
I'm kind of 50-50. I think it got a little out of control, but is like holding it in your palm, the answer. I don't know. I do think that I don't know if this is a rule, but or if it was kind of an unspoken rule that you had to at least show the hand. I don't know if that was a rule or not. But I know like Zane stopped doing the hiding it, right? Because I learned the way to read it this past weekend when I played a game against Sincola, because I haven't played against anybody that had a spin serve, and I finally learned it. I'm like, okay, well now you can read it, but sometimes the ball really kicks, and it's kind of like, well, maybe it's just going too far. You don't want it to be like tennis where it's just all serve. I think pickleball is exciting because of those long rallies, those battles of the kitchen line. I think that's what makes pickleball really exciting. So I don't know. I feel like the pro players have started to read it a lot more. But I wouldn't mind if it went away.
Yeah, I think, John, you bring up a couple of really good points. When we allow the spin serve to survive for 2022, we said we were going to watch a couple of things. One is how deeply and widely does the spin serve penetrate the sport? Well, it hasn't gone real deep. It hasn't gone real wide, especially on the women's side of the game. If it penetrated the sport widely, then the argument about, well, you'll get used to it if you'll see it enough, that was compelling. And the other thing that we said, it's never been outlawed in the sport since 1965. You could always impart spin on it. So that had a kind of a strong reason for why we allowed it to occur in 2022. But as we've watched it now for almost 8-9 months, it hasn't penetrated the sport very, very deeply or widely. So it's become a specialized shot for many players. And those that have perfected it can do some really amazing things with it. And from the amateur standpoint, a lot of the amateurs and pros for that matter still play on converted tennis courts that have now 4 pickleball courts on it. So a really good spin serve creator can drive that receiver into the side fences. And now the sport has changed. So that is probably one of the biggest reasons why the rules committee was, took a really close look at this. It was a long discussion because we understand and recognize, the power of innovation in the sport, but not at the expense of having fun at the sport.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you definitely want innovation, right? But like you said, I mean, I don't think Zane is any worse of a player or Zincole any worse of a player if he doesn't have that serve. I think it was an extra tool in the box, but it wasn't deterring the rest of the points, right? Because once the players figured it out, they were returning them all anyways.
Yeah. Well, you saw that. You saw
would say
that
the
at APP Atlanta. I don't know. Some of the returns were shorter, I think, than what the receiver really wanted to have, but they all got it back across. So.
Yeah, I would say it's more of a problem in singles because the singles return is so important, right? So it's like when you have that spin serve and it really kicks and you just have to make the ball over because it went a different direction. Well, now it's not the serve it's the one that's the winner. It's the third ball because the guy's halfway in the court already, and that was my one thing against Zane a while back when they were first starting to outlaw it, the talk was, he's like, well, look, I don't win any points on my serve. And I'm like, yeah, but you win it on the third,
exactly.
because the ball's landing in the kitchen line, like 4 feet high. Right. So that's where I stand with it. Doubles, it's not as big of a deal, but singles for sure.
What about rally scoring, Mark? What were some of the factors that went into that decision? Was MLP like a good case study for the committee?
That's undeniable what's going on with MLP. You watch the players, you talk to the players. It's fun. They're having a good time with it. It's entertaining. So as the governing body, our responsibility is to see what's happening in the sport and predicting where the sport's going and have the rules prepared for the future. And, a lot of people say, well, rally scoring is really designed for television, so that's coming, or the potential for the Olympics. Well, that had very little to do with our discussion on the rally scoring proposal. The stronger argument was what's going on with MLP. And I think there's also a desire, when we get to television, or we get to weather delays like we had in APP Atlanta, to be able to modify the format of the tournaments and get it caught back up. Right now, the only option we have is go to 1-15, put everybody in a different 1-15 format. Well, if we had rally scoring, we could move everybody, on a weather delay. It looks like we're going to lose this day. Well, if we can get, 2 or 3 hours, we go to rally scoring. Everybody gets a chance to still play in this tournament, which is important because it has national, championship implications. So, or money implications. So from a pro standpoint, tournaments are points, tournaments are money. So they don't get much if the tournament is canceled. So if we have an opportunity to get these matches in, it's meaningful. And
I think it's a good point.
Rally scoring might be the way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point I didn't think about the weather delay, right? Because Stacie, I don't know I'm sure you knew, but Atlanta Open, they had the 4 covered, but the problem with the covered is it doesn't cover enough of the sides. So 2 of the courts still, depending on which way the rain's going, still get wet. So you really had 2 courts that you could play on, pretty much one the entire time. It actually made it more intimate because everybody was watching one court. So literally all the pros played on one court the entire time. So I actually kind of liked it. It was almost like an MLP because everybody was watching it. So it sucks that the stream never got it, right? But you had every person there watching, first round matches. So it was kind of cool. But it would make sense, if you had the rally scoring, that it might make the game move along faster, but I think rally scoring is pretty exciting.
I do too. And if you think about what another advent of the game that we see in the PPA. You saw it at national championships. Is championship Sunday is, best 3 out of 5. Well, if you start bumping up against, TV limitations, then having the opportunity in that 5th game to go to a rally scoring to get it back on time is a potential that's not there yet, but could be. So,
yeah, I think it should be. I don't think it should be mandatory for all tournaments, but I think it should have the option. Like, if you were to ask me my opinion, I think it should be an option within the rules that says you can use rally scoring, and these are the ways you can use it. And still,
John, you're right. I think most people think you hear rally scoring, that their first reaction is no, and no, because they think of it as either or. It's either side out scoring or rally scoring. Well, how about if we developed the optionality of this or maybe this, depending on the situation, and let the tournament director kind of select. So.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think there's positives of both. Yeah. Go ahead, Stace.
I was just going to ask, do you think it will cause any confusion at maybe the beginner or amateur level by having both, if maybe they learned one way versus the other, or how do you think that will play out?
Oh, I think most people will still learn side-out scoring, but I do think, people are already playing recreationally rally scoring because it's quicker, right? You got 40 paddles lined up. You switch to rally scoring, you can get a match in pretty quick. So there's advantages, disadvantages. You don't have to wait as long, but the games don't last as long either. But at least you're out there more frequently, and that's going on. Even though there isn't any rally scoring in the official rule book. I think the method that the MLP has picked has got some real advantages to it because there is no switching of sides. So from an enforcement standpoint, or a referee standpoint, you can use the same score sheet. One of the other options of rally scoring is what they do in badminton. Well, if we switch to the badminton format, where as a successful server, you win a point, you swap over to the other side, you have to have a different score sheet in rally scoring than you have in side-out scoring. With the MLP version, you keep the same score sheet, and it's very easy to officiate. So,
yeah. I like that facet as well, that you can just stay on whatever side you want. I think that, one, it gets rid of the wrong side thing, right? The wrong server. Because you hear the score, you're like, oh, odd. The person on the left serves. It just makes the game really simple to understand, I think, for a lot of people watching it as well.
You're right. Absolutely.
Where, brand new people watching the sport are obviously going to get confused with the score. That's probably one of the biggest limitations, right? When someone's watching it for the first time, like, how are they even keeping score? Which is fine. Every sport's like that, right? You watch I still don't know how rugby's scored, and I barely know how cricket is scored because I watched a documentary on Netflix. And Podcast Nick is obsessed with Indian Premier League cricket, but still so confusing, right? So, but I still think the rally scoring will help. Definitely that, for TV, for sure.
I agree with you.
Should that come into one of the priorities, pickleball as a fan or spectator? Should that be something that weighs on the rules committee?
It has not to date been one of the things that we consider. We really are focused on the 3 things we talked about earlier: integrity of the game, players, and enforcement of the game. The spectator aspect of this is kind of a distant fourth, if at all, interestingly enough. It's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it, but it really doesn't come into play. What's great, what's best for the spectator has not been part of our thinking.
Well, I think it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. I think pickleball hopes or wants more fans and spectators, but we don't have them quite to the same level as maybe some other sports. So it's hard to put that as one of the top priorities when pickleball has such great participation. But just curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, that's why I think when people, argue the relative merits of rally scoring on Facebook, which I spend some time watching what goes on Facebook. And Stacie, you know this from your time when we were working together. It's amazing what you can find are conflicts in the rule book if you pay attention to the dialogue on Facebook or these, the Dink or other, the Kitchen, those kinds of forums, you'll find the errors in the rule book. And over the last 3 years now, we've fixed a lot of those issues. And but you got to pay attention. You got to listen. You got to read. You got to pay attention to what's going on. So the spectators, whether they realize it or not, have had an impact on the rule book. Because as you know, the year that we had 125 rule book changes, most of those were all editorial. And they were all almost exclusively driven by Facebook comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact Mark is looking for all those rules comments. So you're not going unheard, folks. Mark is out there listening.
I mean, it's a good place to look. That's how a lot of people communicate now, It definitely gives you ideas to look at. I always liked when Don Stanley would propose those out-of-the-box rules questions. I kind of wish he would start doing that again. Or if he's still doing that, maybe I'm just missing him. But I always liked those where he'd be like, player A serves to player C, but B is like in the bathroom. So like, what do you do? And it's like the most.
Well, Don's a very, very good friend. He and I are very close, and he still does those. He and I will still have phone calls. In fact, I talked to him yesterday about a scenario, and then he called me right back probably 20 minutes later. What would you do if? And so he and I are constantly challenging one another, and it's a great relationship. He also has a phone call with the referees that are going to ref the next PPA event. He has that on Monday nights, and he throws those challenges out to the referees. So he's still doing it, but in a smaller audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have a suggestion. This is my This is my one thing.
I got my pen. I'm going to write it down.
When will refs have iPads with an electronic scoring system that just makes it easier for them instead of a clipboard and a paper? Because I think it does two things. One, I feel like if somebody designed it good enough, you don't have to do the flips and the paper clips and the pencils, right? You just hit like this, whatever, you hit the scores. And then two, it'll send live scores to the tournament software. Those are my two things that I feel like would be awesome. Is that on the horizon?
And I'll tell you what's going to drive it.
Cool.
Gambling is going to drive it.
Gambling for sure.
Gambling,
which I think is great.
The gambling networks are going to require it because they want to be able to set the matchup so that the people that are doing the gambling can gamble on what's going to happen after the switch at 6. Who's going to win? The second half of this game, kind of thing. So
they want more data.
Yeah, more data is going to drive it. What's been the limitation so far is, what is the interface? Is it a phone? Is it an iPad? Is it a special pad that's developed just for the software? You also have the issues with the lighting. You got issues with all these are solvable, but it takes a concentrated effort. You're going to have to get down to kind of one, maybe two different platforms, and you can't have 15 different ones out there. I probably evaluated personally 5 of these. They all have certain limitations, and then we work with them, and then they seem to disappear. It's too hard or whatever. But we also have USA Pickleball has a relationship with a certain provider that we're working with on this thing. So so you have the limitations on lighting. Sometimes direct sunlight. Everybody who has a cell phone knows what that does to a electronic screen. If you drop it and you break it, what happens? So 2 things will happen. I think gambling will drive it, and then we have to design these pickleball only venues to have Ethernet right into, just like tennis does. If you watch the tennis chair umpires at the better venues, they have the chair umpire. They have the pad right next to them. They've got an umbrella that covers it, and but they're off the court a bit. So there's some trade-offs here.
Yeah.
For pickleball referees, because in order to watch that non-volley zone line, we don't want to be too far away from that net post. So if we get too close with a stanchion there on the court, now we end up affecting potential ATPs, right, or Ernie moves, and so these are all workable, but I think they'll be workable with a venue that's designed from the ground up with this in mind.
Do you think this will be in the next year, 5 years? What do you think?
As soon as the first gambling tournament is created, you'll see it. I'm pretty certain. If not for that tournament, soon thereafter. But I also there's another aspect we haven't talked about. This is a fun conversation. I'm having a great time here. But I think the other thing we have to think about, I'd be shocked if we didn't get into gambling without having a drug testing policy in the game.
That's coming too.
It has to be. I mean, I can't believe that the folks that are going to allow folks to gamble on the game would allow that kind of money to be at stake if we didn't have assurances that the players were drug free.
Yeah. So has USA Pickleball met with like those type of bodies like USADA and those type of governing bodies for the anti-doping?
Yes, we have inquired. What do they do in tennis? That's probably that's our probably closest sister sport that we have. In fact, I just personally looked at that about 3 weeks ago, anticipating this was going to come up at the latest board meeting. And the USA Pickleball board is actively discussing both these topics right now. So I don't anticipate we'll have something here developed. We may not have it shared, but we'll have certainly internally developed.
Yeah. So I just looked it up. ATP uses the ITF as they have their own anti-doping program, I guess. I'm more familiar with USADA, and then whatever the NCAA uses. But then it's like, when do you test people? You know, like, do you show up on their doorstep on a Wednesday when they're home? You know, like, do you do it before the tournament, after the tournament, during the tournament? Either way, though, I think it will be necessary, especially with gambling coming in. I think gambling is great for the sport. I think it should happen. And I'm also all good for a fair, clean sport as well. At least at the pro level. Amateurs, you know, if they want to take steroids, then whatever. More power to them.
I'll tell you the other thing you're going to see more of. You'll see this at nationals for the first time. We're going to have a paddle testing program. So that's kind of an outgrowth of the recent experiences this year. So you'll see paddle testing, then you'll see gambling, then you'll see, as we talked about, drug testing. So all those things are reflective of how big the sport is growing, at least at the professional level.
Yeah. The PPA took my idea about the paddle protests. I put that on Facebook, and they ran with it. AL protested somebody, I think. Who was it? Paris.
Yeah.
It works. I race cars, and we do that. You know, if you think someone's cheating, okay, put the money up. What does it take to replace it? Plus a fee, right? You know, and then you put the money on the line. I don't know.
So, Mark, are all these things going to come under managing director of officiating?
I think I don't know that it'll come under officiating. It'll probably come under competition. So, in the current organization, USA Pickleball, I would imagine this would come under Karen Parrish, but she's loaded up right now. So, it's going to probably be another job for somebody else or a couple of people.
Are there any other big issues like this that you see USA Pickleball or tackling, or you think those are?
I think those as discrete issues are big. I think there's also the bigger picture of the potential for Olympics and how we position USA Pickleball and the sport in the United States to be ready for that. I still think that's a ways away, but I can tell you there are folks that are already working on what the requirements are. How do we position the sport in the United States? This whole international governing body is, Justin Maloof, our chief operating officer at USA Pickleball, is spending a lot of time on the international viewpoint. What do we need to have internationally? because you got to have an international governing body before you can even talk about Olympic participation. So people want to know where their $35 a year USA Pickleball fee goes to. Well, I've just mentioned a couple of things that most people don't realize. That's what you're funding. You're funding the potential for an international governing body and being ready for potential Olympics. You're funding our ability to get the sport ready for these big picture items.
It's definitely a lot to tackle, a lot of exciting issues, but as complicated as it is, it's all good problems, right? The sport's growing and really reaching a worldwide stage and platform, which is exciting to be in it, right?
It's a great time to be involved in a sport as a player, as an administrator, as a referee. It's a great time, and look what it's done for you guys. I mean, you have this platform. I mean, and the influence that you have on the sport is unmistakable. People tune in to find out what's going on in the sport, and you have the connections. You have the connections in your roles here that the average player doesn't have. So they tune in to see, what do you know? Who do you know? Who do you have on your show that can share what's going on in the industry?
We're just out to grow the game. We want everybody to play.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. So, John, do you have any last questions for Mark? I might have one more.
I do. So I was commentating a match at APP Philly, I think I was at, and there was a point, and it was when DJ Young did an around the back, volley, and one of the players thought it hit him, right? Because a few points before he did the same thing and it hit him first. Andre Diescu stopped and was like, no, that hit you, right? And they're like, no, it didn't hit me, whatever. So then all four players agreed to look at the replay. And they didn't want, because the ref didn't see. So all four players are saying, we will agree with what the replay says, even though there's no challenge system. And so, Spencer, the guy next to me, the production, is looking it up. And they're just all looking at us like, what is it? And I was like, well, it didn't hit him. And then, of course, that wasn't like in adherence to the rules, I guess, because there was no official challenge. But do you see that as a problem if all four players are like, whatever the replay says, let's just do it over or play it? Or do you think the ref has to say, no, that's not allowed?
Well, I won't get into the specifics of that example, but I'm on record as saying I do not like, and I think it's a dangerous precedent with all four players decide what the outcome of a match or outcome of a rally is going to be. And we had this we'll have this last year where the referee will make a call or something will happen on the court and the four players come together and say, we'll just replay it. Well, wait a minute. There's no rule that allows that. And if you think about it from the gambling, go back to this gambling. Can you imagine what the gamblers would think if the players then could be outside the rules and decide among themselves? Well, we're just going to serve it around and make it even for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and then you get into, John, we served around because you got caught on that 10-second violation, John. So why aren't you doing the same thing for this footfall we just got called on? So you can see, kind of subtle bullying going on or influencing. So this serving around, the four players deciding what the outcome of rally is going to be, I'm dead set against for a lot of reasons. And I've only mentioned two of them. So
What about in rec play? What if that happened without it in the pros? Rec play okay to replay?
No, it's of course it is. We all do it. But I think we just got to be really careful when we got money at stake, and especially, as I said, when gambling comes into the sport.
I think I agree with you. I think sometimes, it's like sometimes you can tell all four players are very genuine for it, but then there's also that, which those four were, right? They're like, hey, whatever it is, like, do it, right? But then there's also the cases where you will have someone who'd be like, no, I saw this, and then they get bullied out of it, right? So, and you see that, that line, Oh, that ball was in. That ball was in.
John,
like,
we already see it with certain players, and the referees know who these guys are and gals are. There's men and women that will take every opportunity to try to influence the call. If not that call, certainly the next one. And whether they try to do it with the referee or their opponents, it's part of sports. I mean, we know what happens. Mm-hmm. So
well, that was my question, Stace.
You just have to snap back way out. That's all. You just have to be affirmative, I guess. My question for you, Mark, before we wrap it up, if you could change one rule, you didn't have to go through the committee, just Mark gets to decide. Do you have a rule that you would change or propose?
I've already done it. It's already been done.
Were you successful?
Yes.
Can we know what rule you proposed? So what was important to you?
Yeah, I'll share it with you. It's actually Rule 67, and that is the rule on line calls, where as players, in order to call the ball out, we actually have to see the space between the ball and the line. And that has probably been very controversial, because that means if you don't see the space, you may actually be playing an out ball, but because you didn't see the space, you couldn't call it out. So it's an imperfect rule, but without seeing that space, the only other alternative is for players then to create their own criteria for how they will determine the ball is out. And I tell you what, I've studied this thing for 3 years, and some players they adhere to the overlap theory. Well, at least 45% of the ball has to overlap the line. Okay, well, where are you coming up with 45%? That's not written anywhere. Well, it's just, that's what makes sense to me, because I can see that I can judge where the contact point is. And so my contention is, if you're guessing where that contact point is, then you're not certain that the ball is out. And you have to be certain if you're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the opponent. So
my takeaway is, in doubles pickleball, make sure you help your partner out.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, help your partner out.
Yep.
John.
So that's probably the rule that I still get questioned the most, but you would not believe the number of questions I got before that rule was changed to require that space. Now, that doesn't mean the referee has the same criterion, because the referee and the line judges, if we have a different criterion. They can actually make that judgment based on where they think the ball lands. But as players, nope, you got to see the space. So referees and line judges have a different line calling criterion than do players. And that is in the rule book, by the way. The differences between the two different columns. It's in Rule 6D.
Interesting. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such an interesting conversation. I'm glad we got to get into the nitty-gritty on the referees and the rules.
It's been fun.
So thank you for all you do for USA Pickleball, all you do to advance the game. If anybody is interested in becoming a referee or has questions on the rules, please head over to usapickleball.org. You can find Mark there. You can find the rule revision process that he's talking about. Look up all the comments on this year's rule proposals and get some more information. And I think, as John would say, make sure you smash that like button and follow us here at Pickler the Podcast. Head over to thepickler.com and sign up for our free pickleball newsletter. And John, would you like to take us out?
Yep. So, Mark, if you've watched it, we always cheers the camera. So, you've got a cup around you. If not,
fist bumps are acceptable too.
Yeah, it's okay if you fist bump the. You
didn't tell me this part, Stacie.
But thanks for
surprise.
Thanks for joining us, Pickler.
Very good.
Thanks, Mark.
My pleasure.